When you think of a streamlined locomotive, where does the mind immediately venture? Elegance? Power? Speed? What if I told you there was a streamlined locomotive which possessed none of those qualities yet was still a success? We once again turn to the Netherlands and their thoroughbred passenger workhorse, the 3700. Coming in at a moderate 72 tonnes, the same as the London, Midland and Scottish Class 5, the 3700s were only the second largest express locomotives run by the Nederlandse Spoorwegen by the time of our story, 1935. By then, their crown as top NS express power had long been taken by the 3900s. If a comparison has to be made, the 3900s were the Great Western Kings to the 3700s Castle. The 3700s, or jumbos as they were known, could be seen on all types of work, from heavy freight to all manner of passenger workings. Four-cylindered and easy to work with, they had carved out a comfortable niche for themselves as the top dog on the mixed traffic ladder. But times they were a-changin'. In 1935, NS had only just started running their first proper diesel trains in the form of streamlined 3-car diesel multiple units. The success of these trains, initially meant for commuter work, cannot be overstated. They were perhaps the most important step towards a modern Dutch railway since the very first electrified Dutch line in the early 1900s. Though, like most diesels, they had a bumpy introduction, often needing to be assisted by a 3700, resulting in the jumbos also being known as steam diesels during that time. But they were all bumps on the magnificent road of progress. The talk of all railways in 1930s Europe was seemingly a German diesel train named after a sandwich, the success of which became the pride and joy of some puffy-failed art student. With a top speed of 160 km an hour, Der Fliegende Hamburger was more than just a flashy out-and-back intercity train, it was a statement. Diesel is here, and it is the future. But steam took it on the chin and proved it could do better. Over in Great Britain had in 1935 debuted the London and North Eastern Railway's Silver Jubilee, a streamlined steam train which, on its test run, obliterated the Fliegende Hamburger's record by thundering through the English countryside at 181 km an hour. It must be established that streamlining has two main effects on a train. Firstly, once above a certain speed, 100 km an hour, you'll have less air resistance. Due to this lower drag, your machine does not have to work as hard to maintain this speed and power output. But because the machine doesn't have to work as hard, relatively speaking, you'll use less fuel to keep the engine running at that rate. Across the whole of Europe, the NS had observed the exploit of streamlined trains, both steam, diesel and electric. At that time, an NS 3700, number 3804, was undergoing overhaul at the Central Tilburg workshops, and with the recent achievements of the LNER's Silver Jubilee in mind, had been chosen to undergo a transformation into a streamlined locomotive. In order to achieve this, 3804 was given an exterior frame, upon which were then riveted metal sheets. Emerging on the 10th of January 1936, the new form of 3804 was... well, scientists were very pleased with it, at least. The shape of the thing had been determined via wind tunnel testing with a scale model. In order to achieve the slanted sides of the locomotive, the feedwater heater had to be changed from a Knorr type to a Davies and Metcalfe exhaust injector, as the large Knorr arrangement wouldn't have allowed for the slanted sides of the locomotive to be fully straight. The new experiment was tested against non-streamlined 3700s on the line between Tilburg and Roosendaal. NS found that, owing to the lower drag, 3804 cut fuel consumption anywhere between 10 and 15% at speed. Praised were the smooth running qualities and the remarkable ease with which speeds in excess of 110 km an hour were attained. So, NS arranged plans for a further 5 3700s to receive the streamlined casing, and accompanying mechanical alterations to accommodate it, and were proud to call their experiment a success. But enginemen and the travelling public quickly thought of a better way to describe the loco. Nigh immediately, the machines gained the nickname Potvis, which directly translates into sperm whale. The remaining streamlined 3700s were 3800 to 3803 and 3805, to keep their numbers sequential. They differed from 3804 by having their sheeting being welded rather than riveted. Curiously, they were also fitted with windscreen wipers. The numerical first three differed the pattern by not having valances over the rear end of the frame and tender. But the Potvis had one issue, which hampered the ability to truly get the best out of them. But it wasn't an issue with the Potvis themselves. Notice when I refer to the Silver Jubilee, I refer to it as a streamlined train specifically. Well, that's because both locomotive and carriages were streamlined. The whole train was air smooth to create as little draft as possible along the whole length of the train. For streamlining, it is vital that such a consistency is accounted for, as drag can be just as much of a problem if it does not happen at the front of the train, hampering performance. Now, look at this photograph of a Potvis and its train. The carriages are not as tall as the locomotive, they are far apart, with roof furniture which sticks out to catch any air the locomotive had initially cut through. Even worse was that, owing to being 3700s, the Potvis would also handle freight trains. The lower speeds and, again, increased wind resistance by the wagons being all shapes and sizes, rendering the streamlining moot. However, as with all streamlined steam trains, what did them in was the aforementioned art student. In wartime, the maximum speed along NS metals had been lowered to 100 km an hour, with many lines not even allowing anything beyond 80 km an hour. This lower mandated speed completely nullified the benefit of the casings. Starting in 1942, the 6 streamlined 3700s were defrogged, and all but one were to serve in Germany after the fact. Apart from one, which remained in Russian territory, the remaining 4 would return to NS metals and would be overhauled to return to regular service. The irony of it all is that after being called every derogatory name for a streamlined locomotive you can think of, bathtub, clothes iron, panzerwagen, it was 3804 which was among the pool of steam locomotives to work into the last year of NS steam operation, 1958. But really, the Potvis was a doomed concept. Not because it would never have worked, but because if it did, it would have worked too well. Let's take one of the longest train journeys you can take in the Netherlands, for example. The service between Roosendaal and Zwolle travels roughly 220 kilometers from end to end. But there's a scheduled station stop every 22.13 kilometers. Thrashing a steam locomotive to reach speeds in excess of 100 kilometers an hour, and then also having to make it count to a stand every 20-odd kilometers, would have made it chew through spare parts like they were candy, if it could even stop in that time frame at all. Superpowered streamliners between London and Newcastle are one thing. Running them in a place where the big cities are all 50 to 20 kilometers apart from one another is quite another. But also, that streamlined casing is extremely fugly.